He had tried everything. Top surgeons, experimental therapies, whole teams of specialists. And still, his little boy remained rooted to the floor, silent and still, a shell of the son he once knew. And yet when the new maid arrived with a quiet smile and steady hands, everything changed. She wasn't trained to heal, had no credentials, but somehow, somewhere between gentle whispers and small acts of care, the father, a wealthy man accustomed to buying solutions, realized that something deeper was at play, something no medical chart could capture. And in that moment, watching his son press weight on trembling legs, he knew that what she did next would rewrite everything he thought possible. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Doctors had written it off. Neurological trauma, they said. Permanent. Nothing more could be done. And so Leonard Graves stopped hoping. He locked away the medical reports, replaced specialists with silence, and poured himself deeper into work and wine. Until Amara arrived. A woman with no formal education in therapy, no affiliations to any hospital, just a reference from a neighbor, and a calmness that didn't quite match the chaos of the house she walked into. So why did Leonard hire her? Why did Elliot react to her presence in ways no one else had ever seen? And what was Amara really doing when no one was watching? The more the boy changed, the more questions emerged. Why did Leonard tell the school Elliot was still wheelchair-bound, when he had already taken 3 steps? Why did Amara never mention her past? And how did a woman with no voice in the home end up holding its biggest secret? Leonard Graves wasn't always a shadow. 10 years ago, his name was the kind you'd read in Forbes, whispered in pitch rooms, respected in boardrooms. A billionaire tech investor with a reputation for calculated decisions and an intolerance for failure. But that precision never translated to fatherhood. When his wife Claire died unexpectedly in a boating accident, Leonard stopped speaking in full sentences. He didn't cry at the funeral. He didn't take time off. He just hired more nannies, more nurses, more silence. Elliot, just 3 years old, watched it all from the edge of his memory. Once lively and talkative, the boy had slipped into a state doctors called psychosomatic paralysis. No physical cause, no known cure. He stopped walking, stopped speaking, and Leonard, convinced money could fix anything, sought out answers the medical world no longer had. By the time Amara stepped through the gates of the Graves estate, the house had become a shrine of expensive attempts and unbearable quiet. She was 24, the daughter of a truck driver and a retired nurse's aide, the third of 5 children, none of whom ever went to college. What she lacked in formal training, she made up for in something harder to name: stillness, warmth, instinct. She'd grown up tending to younger siblings, taking the night shifts when her mother was sick, humming gospel songs as she worked. She had applied for the maid position thinking only of rent money and groceries. She hadn't expected to meet a boy who stared through her like glass, or a man who rarely acknowledged she was even in the room. The job description said cleaning only. No mention of therapy, no mention of grief, and certainly no mention of what would happen in that house over the next 6 weeks. But Amara noticed things. She always had. The way Elliot flinched at sudden sounds. The way Leonard's footsteps made him retreat. The untouched toys. The piano gathering dust. And the photo on the mantel. A woman with Elliot in her arms, both laughing like nothing had ever gone wrong. It was a Wednesday. Gray skies, scattered rain, the kind of afternoon that made the city feel smaller and heavier. Leonard Graves had returned early from a board meeting downtown. Something about funding delays, a failed prototype. He didn't warn the staff. He never did. As he stepped into the foyer, shaking the water from his coat, he heard a sound that stopped him cold. Laughter, high-pitched, light, a child's laugh. It was coming from the living room, a sound he hadn't heard in nearly 2 years. He followed it carefully, unsure if it was a recording or memory playing tricks. but what he saw when he entered the room made him grip the wall. Amara was on the floor, flat on her back, legs raised in the air like an airplane. And on her feet, balanced and squealing with joy, was Elliot. The boy's arms were outstretched, his eyes wide, his mouth open in a smile that looked like it had been buried for a lifetime. Amara wasn't giving commands or using charts. She was simply present, playful, alive, creating a moment out of nothing. Leonard stood frozen in the doorway, watching his son giggle, shift weight, lean forward, and press down with both legs. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't medicine. It was play. That's what the therapist would later say when shown the footage. But Leonard didn't understand it that way. He stormed out of the room and summoned Amara later that evening. He demanded an explanation, asked if she had taken liberties, if she had crossed boundaries. He accused her of using unapproved methods, of manipulating Elliot. She said nothing at first, only looked at him, calm as ever, and said, "He laughed today, Mr. Graves. Maybe that's enough for one day." But Leonard wasn't convinced. He installed extra cameras. He consulted new neurologists. All of them said the same thing. Psychosomatic paralysis doesn't just disappear. Not like that. Not after that long. But Elliot had changed. In the days that followed, he smiled more, made eye contact. And when Amara was nearby, he shifted weight onto his feet. He refused to walk when Leonard entered the room, wouldn't speak, wouldn't move. It was like the boy knew who he could trust and who he couldn't. Leonard watched from behind screens, never fully believing, until the 6th day. That's when Elliot did something no one expected. He walked. What followed was not celebration, not relief, not even a conversation. Leonard Graves, confronted with the unimaginable, his son standing, unaided, did what came most naturally to him. He questioned it, doubted it, controlled it. Within 48 hours, new cameras were installed in every hallway, in Elliot's bedroom, even the garden. He ordered a full medical reassessment, demanded new neurological scans, and began compiling a file on Amara. She hadn't listed a full employment history. One of her references was disconnected. He brought in a private investigator. The staff whispered, "She's hiding something," someone said in the laundry room. "No way, she's just a maid," said another. The footage from the living room, Elliot's first steps, was sent to a child behavior specialist Leonard trusted. The verdict came back in less than a day. "This isn't manipulation," the therapist said. "This is connection." But Leonard didn't feel connected. He felt exposed. His home, long untouched by anything resembling warmth, now carried the fingerprints of a woman he didn't understand. He issued a gag order to all household staff. No phones during shifts, no media contact. But the walls had already cracked. A tweet appeared late that week. "Maid makes billionaire's son walk?" The account had no profile picture, no followers. But within hours, the post had spread. The Graves name was suddenly trending, and not for innovation or investment. Leonard blamed Amara, said she'd leaked it. She denied it calmly. Elliot, sensing the shift, stopped walking again. He'd sit on the carpet in silence, fingers curled into his palms, eyes searching for Amara. If she was in the room, he would smile. If she wasn't, he'd retreat. Leonard watched this unfold from his study, the screens glowing long past midnight. The doctors offered no new explanation. The therapist repeated what they'd said before. This was progress, but progress needed trust. Still, Leonard refused to let go. He ordered Amara's background checked again, and that's when something unexpected surfaced. A single VHS tape tucked in a box mislabeled in the storage room. Old footage, misplaced, forgotten. It was a nanny cam from years ago, long before Amara ever arrived. But what it showed, and who it captured, would change everything Leonard thought he knew. The tape had been gathering dust for nearly 4 years, buried beneath outdated invoices and unopened birthday gifts in a forgotten storage room. It wasn't labeled. Just a plastic shell with a faded date scribbled across its side, January 17th. Leonard didn't remember installing a nanny cam back then. Claire must have done it. He loaded the tape, half distracted, half disbelieving. What he saw was Elliot, 2 years younger, even smaller, sitting on the same living room carpet where he had taken his first steps. Alone. Silent. Motionless. And then the camera skipped. A newer segment. This one recent. The date matched the week Elliot had started changing. The angle was from the hallway, just past the archway to the den. Elliot was in frame, hands pressed against the couch, trembling slightly. No one else around. He pulled himself up, knees wobbling, fingers curling into the cushions. He stood there for several seconds, uncertain, swaying gently like a candle in wind. Then Amara entered. She saw him, but she didn't rush to his side. She didn't offer a hand. She didn't call his name. She sat in the corner of the room, cross-legged, quiet, and then, softly, she began to sing. A church melody, gentle and familiar. Elliot turned toward her, and without instruction, without cheering, without reward, he began to move. One step, then another, toward her, toward the sound, toward someone who wasn't trying to fix him, only waiting for him to believe he could move. She wasn't teaching him, she was letting him try. Leonard replayed the moment over and over again, his hands motionless on the desk. It wasn't force. It wasn't coaching. It wasn't a breakthrough orchestrated by data or design. It was patience. It was trust. And it was something Leonard himself had never offered. He had spent fortunes on breakthrough techniques, elite specialists, clinical tools with acronyms and promises. But it was a 24-year-old maid with no degree and no agenda who had finally reached his son. Not by pushing, but by letting go. And in that realization, Leonard felt something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Awe and shame. The press conference wasn't planned. Leonard Graves never did media unless it involved markets or mergers. But on that spring afternoon, standing under the soft glow of a community center projector screen, he cleared his throat, adjusted the microphone, and said something no one expected to hear. This was my son's first step, and I almost missed it because I didn't trust love over science. Behind him, a video played on loop. Elliot walking toward Amara, his face lit with joy, her voice humming through the silence. The footage had already gone viral. Millions had seen it. But for Leonard, it wasn't about the view count. It was about the apology. In the weeks that followed, he gave interviews. He credited Amara by name, called her a miracle, offered to pay for her education, housing, anything she wanted. But Amara never responded. One morning, she was simply gone, her room spotless, her uniform folded at the foot of the bed, no forwarding address, no text, no goodbye. Just a single envelope, taped to the inside of the nursery door. Inside it, a note in her delicate handwriting. He didn't need me. He needed someone who believed he could do it without them. Leonard read it twice, then once more, before folding it back into the envelope and placing it inside the photo album Claire had made the year Elliot was born. He never spoke of the note publicly, but he carried it with him. In the years that followed, Elliot grew stronger, more expressive. He enrolled in school, joined a youth choir, took piano lessons. And Leonard, now quieter, now slower, attended every performance, sometimes alone, sometimes with tears in his eyes. He created a foundation in Amara's name, focused on non-traditional pediatric healing. It received thousands of letters, families who had watched the footage and believed for the first time that something outside the system might still be possible. But no one ever heard from Amara again. No social media, no interviews, no sightings. She became something like an urban legend. A whisper passed between mothers in hospital waiting rooms, a name written in thank you cards to therapists. A story parents told their children when progress seemed impossible. And in the center of that story, Unknowable, untraceable, unforgettable, was a young woman who never tried to be a hero, only someone who stayed still long enough for a boy to believe he could move. Some say Amara was a miracle worker. Others say she was just a girl who listened. But what do you believe? Was it intuition, divine timing, or the simple power of presence? Would you have trusted her? Would you have let go of the experts and the protocols and placed your faith in a stranger with no credentials, only a calm voice and a steady heart? We want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment that science couldn't explain? A healing no one predicted? A connection that defied logic? Let us know in the comments. Because stories like Elliot's aren't just rare, they're reminders that sometimes the answers we search for with money, machines, and expertise are waiting quietly in the simplest acts of care. And if this story moved you, stay with us. Subscribe to uncover more true life stories that feel like fiction, stories that remind us of what we often forget, that love, in the end, still changes everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. They called it the Child Whisperer Files. It started small, just a handful of emails sent to the Graves Foundation inbox. But soon, there were hundreds, then thousands, parents from across the country, and even outside it, reaching out, sharing their stories, their struggles, videos of children once deemed unreachable, now walking, laughing, singing. The Graves Foundation grew overnight. Leonard expanded it quietly, naming it after the girl who vanished without a trace. The Amara Initiative. Its mission: to support families exploring unconventional, intuitive caregiving practices for children who had fallen through the cracks of traditional medicine. But even with its rapid growth, one question lingered. Who was Amara? Some believed she had once been a child in the foster system, the type who'd seen pain and knew its silence. Others were convinced she belonged to a spiritual healing group that avoided publicity, devoting their lives to listening, not leading. Theories spread, none confirmed. The bedroom she once used remained untouched in Leonard's home. A single hymnal sat on the dresser, her church choir robe folded in a drawer. No digital trail, no former employers. Even the agency that sent her had gone out of business 6 months before. And so she became a name whispered in online parenting forums, referenced in TED Talks, cited in books that studied trauma recovery through emotional proximity. But always, she remained just beyond reach. A legend born not from miracles, but from presence. The series of stories that followed, families once hopeless, now whole, became known collectively as the Child Whisperer Files. A phrase first coined by a teacher in Montana who watched her students speak for the first time after listening to an old gospel Amara once sang. And while Leonard never confirmed nor denied the many stories tied to her name, he kept one photograph framed in his study. Amara kneeling in the grass, Elliot laughing on her lap. He once said in an interview, "Some people heal with their hands, others heal with their hearts, and some never even knew they were healing anyone at all." Amara never returned, but her silence made her story louder. And for those who were listening, truly listening, it was never about what she did. It was about who she let others become in her presence.